I'm Chief Executive of EcoSem. We have operated here in Ireland now, or will have operated within the next 6 months. We'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary of operating our plant in Ireland and supplying the Irish market. In that period, we'll have contributed to reducing CO2 emissions in the cement sector in Ireland by 2 million tonnes in total. In our other operations elsewhere, the total for the EcoSem group is now over between 5 and 6 million. So this is, by any standards, a valuable contribution towards greening the built environment. It's an example of combination of clean technology and a willingness to lead change in the industry. We have plenty of options in terms of green technology. One of the interesting, even from our last year's discussion together, ideas in terms and economically viable ideas are not scarce in this environment. What's scarce is the constructive leadership that's necessary, and over the last year, what we've seen, the developments we've seen, haven't been entirely reassuring in that respect. We've seen the UN post-Kyoto process really stagnating in terms of real progress. In the absence of coordinated leadership from the main polluting blocs, EU, states and China, it's hard to be enthusiastic or optimistic about the outcome of such discussions. Here at local level in Ireland, we've seen a climate change bill which remarkably has been leached of all policy content. It's like a recipe book without recipes. And it's if you look back, our first attempt in Ireland at constructing a climate change strategy dates from the year 2000. And by comparison, our first attempt 13 years ago was far superior than what we see at the moment. So we really need at national level also to pull up our socks in terms of what we're attempting to do and what we need to do. Then we have just last week, just 8 days ago, the emissions trading scheme was the flagship policy of the EU, was held below the waterline by the EU Parliament in voting against a small change, relatively small change in that system, which caused a collapse in CO2 price in that system. We needn't waste too many tears on the ETS system. It could be better off leaving it to rot where it is at the moment, rather than reviving it in its present form. Last year when I spoke to you, I explained to you how the system operated to actually not reduce CO2, but channel massive windfall profits to the electricity, steel and cement sectors. In the case of Ireland, in the period 5 years to 2012, the subsidy to cement for no reduction in CO2 amounted to 120 million euros. That's not the way to. Our European Commissioner said yesterday in Dublin that the Commission's attitude was very simple, that public money should not be used to promote pollution. The ETS, unfortunately, is just that. And unless it gets in-depth structural reform, there's little point in bringing it back. It's only going to make a bad situation worse. Then we had news from the International Energy Agency again last week that on average the world's electricity is just as dirty now as it was 20 years ago. There's been no net improvement in our carbon footprint from worldwide from electricity production. And we saw also last week that the world is spending 1% of its world GDP on searching for new sources of fossil fuels, even though the existing fossil fuels can't be exploited beyond about 30 or 40% of existing known fossil fuel reserves without causing dangerous climate change. So all of those are examples of a debate on climate change which is being sidetracked as a priority. We have evidence of increased emissions, a retreat from action at international and national levels, the triumph of vested interests in carbon-producing industries, policy reversals, and a lack of political leadership. So unfortunately, the situation does not look particularly good when you look at it in that context. But there is some ground. I don't think we should be giving up, nevertheless, because of the evident discouragement in the general environment. I think there is scope and there is a need to use the technologies we have available to us to make a significant difference in terms of the carbon intensity of our industry. Let me give you some examples based on my own sector that I'm involved in. Construction building materials represent, on average, 11% of, or the manufacture of those represents 11% of world CO2 emissions. So the building materials we use are a very, very significant issue in terms of sustainable building. Of that 11%, 5% is accounted for by one product, by cement. The cement industry is the most polluting manufacturing industry in the world in terms of its CO2 emissions. So when you want to build better, the first issue is careful choice of low carbon materials. And within that, the most important issue is how to get low carbon cement into your buildings. Now, it's not just CO2, because as some of you will have noticed in the papers earlier this week, there were some references to issues of health-related factors, which are also a product of the type of pollutants that arise from major industrial installations such as cement factories. I think the figure I was quoted as having in mind was of the order this century, so far this century, the cement, in the last 12 years, or rather in the 12 and a half years that will finish in the next few months, the cement industry will have generated pollution in Ireland, as measured by the indices provided by the European Environmental Agency, pollution of the order of 2 billion, a mixture of impacts on the built environment, on the physical environment, and also on health. And the health issues are serious ones. We've had An Taisce draw attention in the last few weeks to exactly the same phenomenon in relation to road transport. For example, just yesterday, the EU gave figures of these pollutants resulting European-wide in 420,000 premature deaths annually. So these are not small issues in relation to, these are issues that have to be addressed openly and bravely by everybody involved, including the industry themselves. I've also applied the same analysis to what we do. The product we make, Ecosem makes, is a low-carbon cement based on blast furnace slag. And if you apply it to what we do, you come up with a much lower figure. You come up with a figure that's 4% of the pollution from traditional cements. In other words, we're 25% greener, or 25 times less pollution than comes from an equivalent amount of cement produced in traditional means. Now, these figures are for use in public policy formation. These are figures that help guide what the best policy for government is. And it's important that they're taken into account, and I think they are being taken into account in the government's prospective green public procurement policy, which is rumoured to be making a clear distinction between low-carbon cements and not low-carbon cements. I want to say that Ecosem also wants to take further initiatives in this coming year, in fact in this coming months. Two in particular I'll tell you about. One is where the government has asked under its climate bill for inputs from stakeholders on what content should go into that bill. And we will be making a proposal, actually later on today my colleague Peter Seymour will give you some more detail on our thinking in relation to that, making a proposal on how the sector, the cement and concrete sector, can reduce its carbon intensity by 70% between now and 2020. And we're also launching an initiative to offer to our concrete customers the ability to reduce their carbon footprint by 50% over the next 2 years. So there are things that can be done. The important thing to remember for us is that leadership is also our responsibility. If the customers, if the architects, if the contractors, if the concrete manufacturers address this issue seriously, they can make a huge difference. It's that engagement is going to make things different in the next year if they do change. Thank you very much.